Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, may I have your attention, please? Are you ready to engage in a mind-blowing experience and hear talks about life, technology, entertainment, and business? The next episode of HIPTHER Talks starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Good morning, good day, good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of HIPTHER Talks. Today we're having with us Kristian Gjerding. Hopefully I'm pronouncing it right. From CellPoint Digital. Welcome, Kristian. Thank you for taking the time to have a quick chat with us on the payments industry. And without no further ado, welcome. Take the virtual microphone and shed some story about yourself, your background. Who is Kristian and what are you doing?
Yeah, thank you, Alex. And I assume you're Dutch, so you actually pronounced my last name pretty correctly because we do come from Holland back in the old days.
Okay.
Interestingly,
I'm not Dutch. I just had an instinct on that pronunciation. So
my apologies. I heard one of your podcasts and I thought you said you guys were in Holland. Either way, it doesn't matter. Yeah, great to be here. Thank you for having me. And so just a brief story of me. I'm probably a little bit of a nerd. Stuff that I would assume from guessing your age below 30, probably never really touched a lot is I was one of those kids who built my own ham radio back in the day before computers really came in. I was operating some of the first computers in school when you were actually storing data on paper. And then I grew into the mainframe age and onto to what I do now. So I would say I'm probably a little bit of a nerd who enjoy technology. I was a very early gamer when games were very slow and 2D, from Donkey Kong to more sophisticated stuff. I got the two children who are vivid gamers, so obviously. Pretty much into to the things going on, the various platforms and players, and so I'm a technology nerd. I love starting businesses. This is my second venture. It's been a fun ride, and I guess I just enjoy the combination of how you see new things evolve into stuff you didn't really anticipate, right? And I think gaming is a really good example of that.
Yeah, indeed. And you are the CEO of CellPoint Digital. Could you let us know how this whole company started? And more than that, what's the current activity?
Yeah, absolutely. So before I started by myself, I was working in the enterprise space, big corporations, global stuff. And one day I thought to myself, like, this is where I gotta start my own business. And so I started a company that was doing really digital content for mobile devices quite early on. We're talking 2001. And from that, I got into working with digital content providers, billing platforms, all the different things that constitutes a business enabling brands to distribute digital content to consumers. And so sold the company, and with that background, it was clear to me that a few major changes were going on, right? One was that obviously digital sales channels were, and remember, gaming when I started was not online, right? You would download a game and you would play against a computer, pretty simple, right? And at this point in time, games were beginning to come online. We were seeing a whole range of things happening in the digital channel from a sales perspective. So merchants were moving online. Mobile was becoming real. It was no longer a debate whether it would really take off or not, which was the case back in 2001, particularly in the US. And then on the other side, payments were becoming fragmented. Back in 2000, whatever, 2, 3, it was credit cards, right? That was pretty much it. And there was a lot of conversations about, wallets and digital money, but nothing had really been rolled out for real on a global scale at that point. But it was clear to me that was happening. And the last part was that we would see merchants struggling to connect their infrastructure to these new environments, right? So the digital sales channel, the fragmenting payment ecosystem, and then their legacy environment, whatever that may be. And so we started by building a platform that would orchestrate between these things, to simplify the workload for the merchants, so they could concentrate on their primary business, gaming, for instance, and still have flexibility, control, and most importantly, a business advantage in terms of basic financial contribution. We wanted to enable them to manage the financial supply chain. And that's what we set out to build. We launched our platform in 2010 and have been evolving ever since. And today, we operate everything from major airlines to small gaming companies around the globe. And we're, I would say, a small global company.
That sounds really, really nice. Now, as you're in the industry, how's the payment market looking in 2022? Where are we in this moment, and what do you think is the major trend towards 2023, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. And so again, you're in the gaming space, you're seeing what's going on. And obviously gaming has dramatically evolved over the last 5-6 years, right? It really kicked off with first the handheld devices coming out in a quality when you could start playing more sophisticated things. A lot more online gaming was coming into the market. And at the same time, you were seeing more diversification in the financial models of gaming companies, where everything from, buying monthly access or buying points to get access to do things or buying skins or whatever it may be, you were starting to see the gaming environment evolving. And I think what's happening in payments is the same thing. And this digital trend, by the way, is also reflected in traditional commerce. We're seeing that obviously we started with simple online stores. Everybody knows the story of Amazon, but the marketplaces were coming into existence, brands were going online, but it was still constituting a pretty small amount of revenue. Now, 2022 going into 2023, post a pandemic that literally closed down physical retail, you're seeing a massive transformation into a digital reality. And if you add to that sort of the whole VR environment coming online, consumers today across the ages and across the generations are really adopting a digital lifestyle in many ways, which means that for payments, this market is just accelerating, despite what we see right now with a recession looming, terrible situation in the Ukraine, and obviously an environmental impact that requires immediate action, which are all things that creates uncertainty and massive inflation. We're seeing these things happening, and despite that, you're still seeing an overall growth across the transformation from a physical to a digital world. And I think that's not going to stop. I think that's going to continue. And I think with that, obviously, the payments industry is going to evolve even more. We're only just seeing the real revolution happening, if you wish. I think a lot of stuff is going to be rolled out over the next couple of years. We're seeing the pace of innovation accelerating quite dramatically. What happened the past 2 years is probably more than happened the past 10 years, and so on and so forth. Now, having said that, I think if you boil this down to why is this important? Well, the simple reality is that consumers are more varied than it used to be, right? To get a credit card back in the day, you had to have credit, depending on what country you're living in. There was just very specific things and some hindrance of access to buy things online. What we see now is my 11-year-old has a debit card. My 14-year-old has a debit card. They buy their own things online. They do their own things on games. They trade stuff online. We're seeing unbanked coming into markets in developing countries where the consumers are becoming technically astute. They know what they're doing. They get access to wallets and an ability to fund these wallets through various means. And they're looking for alternative forms of payment just because traditional credit cards or banking services does not suffice in a reality where not everybody, can have a stellar credit or a perfect scenario, right? We all have different realities. and yet they still want to trade online. And so what that means is that we're going to see a tremendous growth in innovative ways for people to pay for things and to accumulate funds in various online means. NFTs is another interesting thing that, particularly in the gaming industry, will have an impact over time. Cryptocurrencies and whatnot. So I think it's a really interesting and bright future, if you wish, for the payments industry and also for the gaming industry, for that matter. I think we're going to see a lot of interesting, innovative things coming to light.
Wow, thanks for that input, which was really comprehensive. Now, before digging into more exciting and tricky questions, I took a dive on CellPoint website, and I saw there a term that really made me ask this like straightforward: what is payment orchestration, and how does it fit in the gaming landscape? Since we're on the subject.
Absolutely. So payment orchestration is almost in the words, right? It's about orchestrating what we call this financial supply chain. If you're a merchant, a gaming provider, your primary business is to create innovative games or gaming platforms or whatever it may be that you do within the gaming industry, right? That's your primary focus. That's where you put your innovative energy and the primary amount of the funds that you have available to evolve your business. Same for any other merchant, right? If you're an airline, you should worry about flying planes and getting passengers safely from point A to point B, and preferably comfortably as well. And so when you look at all the parts that technology plays and operations plays and whatever it may be, there's just a lot of bits to running a business, right? And so payment is one that traditionally was just something you had to have in order to complete a transaction. Today, it's a revenue multiplier and also a way for you to lose money if you don't do it right. And so in reality, if you look at the progression of payments, started off with cash, then credit cards, checks, whatnot. And in the online reality, credit cards were the initial form of payment. Now you got a whole slew of different payment methods, alternative forms of payment. Apple Pay and Google Pay are some of the most known ones. PayPal for sure, Alipay and whatnot. But there are thousands of payment methods out there in the world market. And different markets, different regions have different needs and different desires. On top of that, when you are a regional or global provider, which a lot of gaming companies are just by the nature of the beast, right? I mean, look at some of the gaming platforms that are out there are serving consumers on a global basis. Now you're certainly into what we call cross-border payments, which means that you have a merchant residing in one country and a gamer or a consumer in another, right? So it's not just like you sitting in Copenhagen like I do, and I'm buying something from my local provider with my debit card or whatever I pay with. It is now certainly more complex, a more complex operation, which contains more fees and ways for you to lose the transaction for risk analysis, all different kinds of things. So when you look at this expanding and fragmenting ecosystem, you look at the many different channels you're deploying your services in and potentially regions of the world, payments become very complex. And this is just getting the payment. Once you have received payment for a service, now you got to reconcile that payment against your books because you must be reporting your books in whatever country you're operating in. You're going to reconcile it with your accounts. You want to make sure you get paid. And there's a lot of different steps that are what we call back office. So you got the front office into the digital channel, which is getting the player or consumer to pay and successfully complete the transaction. And then on the other side, you got the whole complex back office environment where you need to ensure you're actually getting the money settled from your bank and all these different things, right? And you will have, particularly in the gaming industry, a lot of chargebacks, right? Or fraud is prevalent. So you got problems you got to overcome as well. This is a lot of work. And I can guarantee you that as you build your gaming company, that's not where you put your first focus, right? So what does payment orchestration do? Payment orchestration enables you to get a single API, a single connection into a platform that gives you control over your financial supply chain, from deploying the appropriate payment method into the correct channel at the right time in real time, get the payment settled, deliver the goods to your customer, and then also ensuring that you get settled on the back end, that the money is moved into your bank account so your cash flow works, and that you're reconciling it correctly against your books. That is what payment orchestration really do. It spans end to end, connecting into the banks that you work with to get payment from consumers, from credit card providers or APMs or whatever it may be, and all the way through to saying, hey, when Kristian comes online, he's on the Steam platform, he'd like to play Roblox and Phantom Forces, whatever it may be, right? Any other similar game, Fortnite, whatever you want. And we know that he's residing in Denmark. Last time he came to transact with us, he probably prefers to use mobile pay because that's the prevailing payment method in Denmark, right? And that way we know he successfully complete the transaction. That's what payment orchestration does. And I can tell you, being, again, a father who still games, in all honesty, because if I don't, I can't keep up with my boys. So I need to be continuously playing. But I also must admit that I was a gamer early on, as I said. And so still do certain games, right? And I can just see the problems they have continuously trying to buy something on this new platform or new game they want. And kids, which is really the gaming generation, will switch games with some frequency. It's not just one game they play. They play different games, continuously add new games. One group will play one game, another group plays another game, and so on and so forth. And you can just see the maturity level of any gaming platform or provider in the way they manage the payment transactions. And I often experience that the payment fails because we're using a credit card locally or payment method locally that doesn't work with the payment provider who is residing somewhere. It could be anywhere, Asia, US, anywhere in Europe, right? And so payment orchestration will help you deploy payment methods that will bridge that gap. And I think that's really important. I hope that was a good answer.
Yeah. It really makes sense, and it is important to cover this gap between the merchant and the client, because I didn't want to reveal this, but I was an avid gamer myself, and I know the whole struggle with this. Now, in terms of the gaming industry, what's the trend that you see going on regarding the whole payments area? Is there something specific that you see skyrocketing, or something that's going down that everybody was used to? What are the major directions you see that payment is encountering in the gaming industry?
Yeah, so there's a few different trends going on. The subscription, I wouldn't say war, but the subscription drive is coming to a point where gamers are becoming way more sophisticated, and you're not going to see one gamer subscribe to 20 different subscription platforms, right? They're just not going to do that. They're going to make a few selections, and so what that does is it requires the merchant to be smart in the way they create their business models to attract consumers to buy, which means that what we call ancillary sales in the airline industry is really trying to spread your income over a number of different things, right? That suits the game form that you're presenting. And so what does that mean in practical terms? Well, one could be that, I may buy a subscription for one gaming platform that has a lot of games. Steam is one example of that. But it could also be that I am a single game provider with a really intense game, and I can't sell a license anymore. I got to give access with freebies initially to get people onto my game and play. And so I might be charging, what's called in-app payments, right? Or in-app buying opportunities. And that includes all kinds of stuff, right? It could be NFTs for my game. It could be tradable skins. It can be any similar things that is just there. It could be buying points or coin, whatever you want, for me to buy things in the game. So it's all about making the game relevant, obviously, for the player, and the business model aligned to a reasonable point, right? The problem we see sometimes is that a merchant becomes a little too greedy, and then they start to see a trail of payments happening. That diversification is complex to manage, because it depends a lot about what is the size of the transaction, if they become too creative, they could risk that their acquirer will block their transactions or PSP will not accept them, et cetera, et cetera. The issuing bank to the consumer, the bank that issues the payment method may not allow the consumer to complete the transaction with that particular payment method, even though it may be completely legitimate. And so this is another trend. And the last trend is there are very, very creative providers out there, people who will try and wholesale NFTs or points or something that they obtain in a way that is questionable. Let me put it that way. And so that presents a problem for those that actually are the payment rails on the back end of this environment. And then that results in higher decline rates. So when you look at these three areas, this is what I think is from a payments perspective, probably the bigger picture things that gaming merchants should be focused on to maximize conversions, because it's a constant struggle. We just see business models changing, continue to evolve over time, right? They have to. We're seeing that things may be super hot for a short period of time, and the payments industry may not necessarily be able to follow suit in understanding what that means. And that results in increased either fraud levels or chargebacks meaning that the consumer may make a purchase and then say, hey, I didn't do that, right? And they just file a chargeback claim. And that's a bad thing for the merchant because it reflects bad on their ability to get acquiring for their payments. And so you see all these different things happening, resulting in lower conversion rates. This is where payment orchestration can help you to a large extent by super optimizing continuously on the trends within your consumer base, the business model you're deploying, and then the ecosystem that you connect to. Because payment orchestration looks at things based on rules and says, hey, in this particular scenario, we're going to present this form of payment to the consumer. Or if this consumer gets rejected the first time, we have a way to retry that payment through another route. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And going on to my next question, which you already partially answered. My next question was about the pain points in pain points in the gaming industry that you already mentioned some. Are there any particular issues that you think they should be specifically addressed when we talk about the future of the payments in the gaming industry?
Absolutely. And there's a couple. One is make sure you present the form of payment that your consumer base wants to use in whatever region you're selling your services, right? And that's really important. And that also includes make sure you offer the right payment method that suits the business model that you're deploying. That's one. The other one is back to the technical nerd a little bit. When I meet gaming merchants, they are very much engaged in the service they want to provide, right? They're nerds is a big word. I don't want to say that, but they're also a little bit nerdy in that they're really focused on what they're creating. It's a creative environment, right? It's not a fiscal astute environment per se. I'm not saying that they don't understand how to run a business. I'm just saying that that's not their number one priority. And so quite often, it's not that payments doesn't come into consideration, but it's not their first priority. And so what that means is they typically create something that is either innovative, new, or is just doing things in a slightly different way. And the net result is that then they meet reality and they're seeing lower conversion rates, they're seeing higher costs, and they're seeing less flexibility in the way they manage this. And so that is really another big area for them to be focused, because payments should be creating a profit for the organization. It should be a way for you to maximize your revenue stream. And if it's done incorrectly, it actually becomes much larger cost with a high degree of lost revenue as opposed to what you're trying to accomplish. And just to give you an example, and you tried it yourself, if I'm buying a $1.99 or $4.99 item, it's not free, I get it, but it's not $1 million, right? It's what we call a low value transaction.
Yeah.
For the consumer as well. And if that fails the first time, if I could do more than 3 things, my attention span disappears and you lost the sale. And if that is something that you're really focused on as part of your business model, that could be a significant amount of money. So I think these 2 areas are probably very important. And then I would say the last one is probably fraud. Always be wary of fraud, right? If you are into the gaming space, this is a place that professional hackers are most certainly trying to gain access, because there's just a lot of money. It's very spread out on a global scene, and it's typically companies, as I said, that come up with a sort of very nerdy or gaming focused attitude, and they probably think about payments and fraud last.
Mm-hmm. Now, in order to wrap this up really nicely in a combination of a closing statement and an overall recap, how do you think payments in gaming will develop, and what will gaming merchants need to prepare for?
I think game merchants need to prepare to deploy many more forms of payment with higher speed and accuracy into whatever geographical market channel they choose and business model they want to deploy. They need to be able to react very, very fast in order to optimize. I think where payment orchestration will contribute the most in gaming moving forward is to help increase conversion rates. So for every customer coming online, the number of customers converting to a successful sale, to increase that, to give them cost reduction capabilities, so managing the cost of actually taking payments, i.e., open banking capabilities, APMs, etc., and to manage the flow of funds to ensure cash flow positiveness. And last but not least, I think it'll help increase the strategic maneuverability. They're going to be able to strategically move faster with less effort. So do more with less, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So thank you, Kristian, for taking the time to, I wanted to say have a chat with us, but more taking the time to explain this whole ecosystem and the workflow of the whole payments industry in the gaming sector. Thank you to our audience as well for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe to all our channels, and stay tuned for the next episode, and see you next week.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining. Be sure to check back next week for the next HIPTHER Talks, and subscribe on Amazon Music, Overcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Mixcloud, and Pandora.